So, LaShawn, thank you so much for joining us tonight for our CNE in 60 Days cohort. This is our March 2023 cohort. So, LaShawn, why don't you just start out telling us a little bit about your journey for those of you that are joining us here live in our CNE 60 Days March cohort. You all would be excited to know that LaShawn graduated and completed in the January cohort of the CNE in 60 Days. And we've already had one successful nurse educator colleague. In fact, on February 14th, yes, it was Valentine's Day, he joined the call just to say that he had successfully passed the exam on that date. And I'm happy to share that LaShawn is our second successful nurse educator colleague that has passed the CNE. So LaShawn, tell the group a little bit about yourself and what are some of the contributing factors that you felt like led you to being successful, and congratulations.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. It's nice to meet you ladies. And I am ecstatic because I just took it this morning and just found out today. And I immediately emailed Dr. Sellers and told her that I passed, and she was gracious enough to invite me to come on and talk. So I am just so thankful, so grateful. I'm a believer, so I attribute all my success to God. But aside from that, I did the 60 days, just like you all are doing. And I was trying to work and get it in. And I had so many things going on with my work, and you know how that is.
Yeah.
And so I really, tried to follow the plan and tried to put in my hours and just hustle. I will say that I did a lot of hustling in this last week. I put in as much as I could, but this last week, I just really put in quite a bit. And I did a lot of writing in the very beginning. As I was going through the workbook and doing my videos and doing my reading, I did a lot of writing alongside with that, writing out the blueprint. I wrote out the blueprint at least 2 or 3 times and just, writing it out and making sure I was connecting those dots and reading the things that I wasn't really sure about, going back and looking at the resources. My red book is all marked up.
Good.
Yeah, Billings and Halstead is marked up as well.
I'm getting it.
Yeah, it's a lot. And so just a lot of doing that. I will say, Dr. Sellers, and I don't know if this is good or not, but I will say that I did purchase extra questions, and I did extra questions just to kind of make sure that I felt comfortable enough. But when I really stop and think about it, there was nothing there that was added extra from the extra questions. So I have to be honest and truthful and say that I purchased the questions, but it wasn't anything that I was lacking from the course that I took once I saw the questions. So I would say that you all are on the right track. Continue to do what is working for you. Just do more of it, because when I first got into the test, it was a little bit of a jar, because I felt like, oh my goodness, I didn't see this. What is this? But then after I finished the test, I had some questions that I flagged, and I was able to go back and look at those questions. And then I had enough time where I went back through my whole test.
Okay, great.
And so I could really kind of relax and look at the questions again and make sure that I answered them in the way that I felt was appropriate. Some I made a few changes too, because I felt like I was rushed in the beginning and was trying to read fast, but I really was able to go back and kind of sit with the question a bit and was able to, I felt like I made the right choices. And so I think that the test is hard. I'm not going to say that it's not hard. It's a hard test. But if you're putting in the work and the time and using whatever learning style that works with you, you can be successful on the test.
Excellent. And I think you said some key points. LaShawn, you talked about your goal of following that 7-week study plan. You know, one of the reasons why we talk about our 7-week study plan, aside from the fact that we know it's been successful for so many nurse educator colleagues that we have supported over the past several years, but another key point is it helps you focus. Even if you're not able to complete the 20 to 24 hours in week 1, you're able to just sit back and think about what it is that you know and what is it that you don't know. So when you do get to those last 2 or 3 weeks, that's when you can really dig your heels in and focus on those content areas that are still a little muddy for you. So I think that's a great point. And then the second point is what you all have already heard me talk about numerous times, and that is having your resources in front of you, even as we're talking through the content. And I know we talk a lot about a lot every single week, but having those resources in front of you, referring to the pages that we talk about every single week. And then, of course, you all will have the masterclass, as we said, at the end of this process on April the 8th for you all to ensure that you are closing those last few loops in the learning process and then asking any clarifying questions that you have. Excellent. Well, thank you so much, LaShawn, for joining us. And I do want to open it up to the group for you all to ask questions if you're okay with that, LaShawn.
Sure, absolutely.
Okay, excellent. Christine, I see your hand. Go right ahead.
Hi, LaShawn. I'm anxious to find out first. Are you an academic member or a clinical member?
Hi, Christine. Nice to meet you. I'm an academic member. I'm a professor at a Christian university down in Collegedale, Tennessee, right outside of Chattanooga.
Okay. Yep. Know the Tennessee area. Been to that Vanderbilt area. Yes. Well, good. And what would you say? Because my challenge is most of my colleagues that I just finished up my doctorate program, but they were all faculty. And I'm taking the CNE for the faculty or the academic because that's a goal of mine. But what would you say was the hardest? Because I heard from one of my professors who's got a PhD and she said, oh my gosh, that's a hard test. What would you say are the things that you found would have been the hardest topics? Is there any the section you thought was the hardest?
Is it okay to say, Dr. Sellers? Is that something?
As long as you can talk about general areas, not specific questions.
Okay. I would say to focus on evaluation, program evaluation, assessment. That to me was the hardest.
Yeah, I kind of heard that. Yeah.
Yeah, that part was the hardest.
Program evaluation and evaluation processes then.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I would say that's very common. I think the themes that we're hearing for many nurse educators like LaShawn that have recently completed the CNE exam is that there's a lot on theory, a lot on learning theory, specifically aligning with teaching strategies and evaluation strategies and program evaluation and outcomes. So I think those continue to be some of the most popular questions that many nurse educator colleagues see on the exam and they remember, because oftentimes, as we've mentioned, it can be a 3-part question, but not necessarily. And sometimes there can be a lot of information in a question that may or may not be directly tied to the question that you're being asked.
Right.
But you have to stay focused on, okay, what is this question asking of me? And what is it that I know
throws me off every time?
Yes. What was that?
Throws me off.
Yeah. The teaching strategies weren't hard for me, but the program evals and outcomes, that was a little bit more challenging.
I agree. I think that's what I'm going to find the most challenges is test. I have the NLN book too for the other one, and because it has similar content, and they have a whole mathematical testing, statistics for figuring out if it's a valuable test or not. Oh my gosh, I hope that's not what we're going to be tested on. But thank you for that. That was very helpful.
How much was on me? I've always been like the IM analysis, the biserial, the KR20 interrelated. there, I mean, that's what scares me more than some of the other.
Well, I would say definitely study that. If you're scared of it, definitely study it because you will see it.
Well, I know it's pivotal to evaluation. That's where I have, like I said earlier, I write things down. So I'll go in and I'll write out like criton and then interrelated and the variable. And I know a little bit about my stereo and KR20, but it's been 20 years ago
Mhm.
and I haven't had to use it. So that's probably my weakest.
Yeah, well, if you know that that's a gap already, then make sure you put that on your top of your list to really focus in on.
Where does it focus in on the blueprint?
On the blueprint, I don't have it in front of me. I
Bridget.
think it's.
That's competency 3. Mhm.
Oh,
Okay.
Evaluation, yes, assessment and evaluation strategies, and we're gonna spend a little bit of time focusing on it here as part of our CNE in 60 days. And so one of the assignments that you all have is completing the item analysis assessment prior to session 3. And at the beginning of session 3 is where we're going to go over the right answers, which you'll see them after you complete that self-assessment. But you're going to complete that, and then we're going to talk about it in session 3. But we're also going to talk about it in depth during our master class.
Okay.
Yeah. And Dr.
that's
Sellers
always
does a
been-
really good job of explaining all of those elements.
That's just always been a stickler when they're looking at, test validity and do we need, is this question too easy? Is it too hard? Did we put the right distractors?
Right.
Did we not put the correct, too many? Did we word it wrong?
Yeah.
Yes.
And how does this parlay into next gen?
Yeah. Looks
Yes.
like Tiffany has a question there, Tiffany.
Yes.
All right.
Thank you. Yes, I just
Thank
want to
you.
make sure, Trudy or Cindy, did you have any other question?
No, ma'am,
did,
I'm
but
good.
after Tiffany. That's
Okay,
fine.
Tiffany, go right ahead.
Thank you. So I know that you use Dr. Sellers, but is there any helpful advice that you can give as far as how to appropriately answer the questions? So it's not always a matter of knowing the content, because you may know the content, but these questions are written in such a way that it makes it very tricky, I know for me, to actually answer them, if I'm making any sense. But do you have any helpful hints for that? Because I have a lot of test taking anxiety. So I'll know content, but when it comes to choosing one out of those last two that are so very similar, do you have any advice that you can give for that?
Nice to meet you, Tiffany. That is a good question. And I would say that, like you, I too have anxiety because it would come down to two answers that I thought were just really good. And then I had to go back to the question and look at not what the stem first, the first part of the stem, because there could be, some elements to a question where they have just one question and it's very simple. You can tease it out very easily. But then they have parts of a stem that they may have 1, 2, 3 parts to the stem. And you're like, oh my goodness, let me not get lost in this. Let me go back and read it again. Let me just take a deep breath, relax. I know this content. Let me think through what the question is actually asking. And so oftentimes when I would go back and look at the question, I'd look at the first part of the question and think, okay, so that's not really related to what I need to look at. Let me go down here and see exactly what the question is asking. And then when I did that, Tiffany, I was able to tease out much better what I needed to focus on. And so my advice would be to take a deep breath. You know this content, read it carefully, make sure you understand what the question is asking you, because oftentimes, like Dr. Sellers said, they will have information in there that is there to cause you to really think it through critically. And so because you know this information, just sit and think for a minute and tease it out. And oftentimes it will come to you. It will come. And so just take your time. And if you have enough time, like I did, go back and reread some of the questions. You can flag a question. You can flag it, and you have the ability to go forward and backward in the test. So you can flag it. You can let it sit for a minute until you have time to come back and look at it again. Go on to another question so you don't get so worked up about not knowing an answer right away. I think that really helped me. I flagged about 10 questions that I was able to go back, look at, and just sit for a minute and say, okay, let me think about what this is asking. And so if you have anxiety, those are some things that I would suggest.
And I
Thank
think
you.
those are excellent points.
And
And that's
you can do it. You can do it.
Tiffany, absolutely. And I think that's the beauty of the test design, really, I have to say, is that you can go back. And, you know, for me, I took a very similar approach. It's just going through all the entire exam and being confident about the answers I was choosing. So remember that it's 80% competence, and that 20% of reassurance and your mindset, that's the piece that LaShawn is talking about, taking those deep breaths. You know, my recommendation, even though I know it may be hard, but at least 3 or 4 days before the exam, not to look at the content, realizing that if you need to look at it, then I prefer that you do. But what that's going to allow you to do is really center yourself in a way that's going to allow your mind to kind of reset and for you to think about what your goals are. Journaling is another great strategy to use. And I would just say, if you know that, you know, and all of us have some level of test anxiety, but if you know that you have an alarming amount of test anxiety, then what you want to do is think about what calms you. You know, I think taking deep breaths is a really great strategy, and think about what else calms you. For me, it was definitely scheduling the exam on a Saturday, because I didn't want the distractions from work or concerns, possibly missing a call, or all of the thoughts that come in our mind when we want to stay focused, but we get distracted. So just making sure you're thinking about what are some of those strategies that have worked for you when you need to manage that anxiety in a way that is not going to create a barrier for you, because that's what anxiety does. It just creates a barrier. And the other point I want to share, and then I know Trudy had another question, and we appreciate your time, LaShawn. We'll wrap up with Trudy's last question. But the other recommendation I would have is exchanging emails. I know that sometimes when you're going through this journey and there's no other colleague at the university that is on this journey with you, you all are certainly welcome to exchange emails with each other. That's the part of keeping this group small, because I do want this to be part of your support community, so that you can kind of talk through the next steps with each other and just reassure each other, especially those of you that may cross that success line sooner than others. That's the other recommendation I would have, is just to reach out, and just support each other. All right, Trudy, I see your hand up. So
Yes.
go right ahead.
And I just put my email in the chat because I think that's a good idea.
Yeah.
LaShawn, thank you so much. But what did you specifically do to prepare yourself the night before?
Oh, what a good question, Trudy. Nice to meet you as well. I'm going to unfortunately have to dishonor Dr. Sellers' advice. I'm sorry.
That's okay. Listen, remember my last point in that sentence was you have to do whatever is best for you.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I'll say this, because this week was my spring break, I purposely scheduled it during spring break so that I could have a little time before it, just to make sure I was centered in the content and knew it well. And so, Trudy, I will be honest and say I was studying. And I was rewriting again, because writing is something that helps me to feel like I'm connected and centered in that content. So I was writing, I was looking at videos the whole day yesterday, and I cannot tell a lie. I won't tell a lie.
No.
That's what worked for me, because it made me feel comfortable and it made me feel confident.
Okay.
So that was what I did.
Well, thank you. I know I share with my students, like before their proficiency exams that we were talking about before everybody else got on. I tell them eat a good breakfast or a good lunch, get a good night's rest the night before. If you've done all the work, get out of your own way.
Yeah.
And one of my students just emailed me that she'd passed her NCLEX. And she said, I got out of my own way. And I thought, so that's why it was important to me to hear how you prepped so that, I can be thinking about these types of things.
Yes, I will also add that I did go to bed early. I went to bed, got some good rest.
Good.
I prayed. I woke up.
Yep.
This morning, I had my worship. I felt good. And that was it.
That's it. That's
Yeah.
it. Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, I think
Thank
that's
you.
great advice too. And that's why I wanted
Thank you.
LaShawn to come. So you all could ask questions, again, maintaining the confidentiality and the integrity of the CNE exam. But I think it's just good to hear, firsthand account of what that experience was like. Now, I'm curious, LaShawn, which videos, do you want to share which videos you watched or which specific your top gap areas were with the group?
My top gap areas, when I went back yesterday, I wanted to go over the educational theories. So I went back and looked at those videos again and wrote out those theories and wrote out some of the information regarding the scholarship of discovery and integration and application. I'm sure they haven't gotten there yet, but so those areas,
it's coming.
yeah, it's coming, it's coming. So those were some of the videos I went back and just kind of refreshed myself, did a little more reading around those areas, and made sure that I had the verbs kind of set in my mind from the cognitive domains. And the affective and psychomotor. So those were kind of my 3 areas where I focused the most on yesterday.
Excellent. And which videos were those? Was it the YouTube channel or was it CNE in 60 days?
I did both.
Both. Okay.
I did both. Yeah.
Okay. Excellent. Cindy, I'm sorry. Did you have a question also?
Sorry. You said it was educational theory and then
For my top 3, Cindy, is that what you're asking? So my top 3 areas were, I did the scholarship domains, and you haven't gotten there yet, but she said it's coming, and the educational theories.
Yeah.
And then I did the cognitive, psychomotor and affective domain.
Oh, gotcha. Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, LaShawn, again for joining us. We really appreciate your time. I know this was helpful for everybody, and it certainly was validating for me just to know that Dr. Sellers Educate is continuing to make a difference. So we celebrate today.
Thank you.
Your time.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. Thank you for all that you did, Dr. Sellers. I appreciate your graciousness. Nice to meet you all, and I pray you all do well.
Yes.
Pray for us.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.